Hey everybody, and welcome to part 2 of my armature tutorial series. So in the last video we had a look about how to make the wire skeleton for the base of our armature. And today we're going to be looking at how we add wool to that and how we start bulking it out. So before I start, I just want to say, if you can hear my parrot for starters and construction work in the background, it's just one of those weeks. I can't find any quiet time to record anything, so hopefully it's not too bad. We'll see. So we've got our wire base, and what we're going to do, we're going to take a big chunk of carded wool. So carded wool is kind of like a combed, matted type of wool, so it's very easy to felt. This particular strip is about 30 centimetres, and what we're going to do is we're going to take little slivers. So out of this wodge we're hoping to get 5 nice long slivers of wool. So when you split carded wool into slivers, you will notice it's kind of a little frazzly and a little crazy. Bad hair day. But don't worry, this is actually great for felting with. And these strips are about 1 centimetre wide. So once we've got those slivers, we'll grab our wire frameworking again, and we're going to take one piece of that sliver and we're going to wrap it around the spine. So we start a little bit in front of this neck here, so which would be the chest, I suppose. You're going to wrap it around a couple of times, hold it with your fingers and keep it nice and tight as you go. And you're going to wrap all the way along the spine. And as you start doing this, you will notice that the wool starts to hold itself in place, so you can relax a little bit with your fingers. And keep going all the way along over this little bracket, pelvis I guess, and all the way to that tip of the wire. So once you get to the end, what we're going to do is we're going to wrap that wire back on itself to trap the wool. So we're going to grab our flat nose pliers to move that little tip back onto itself and squeeze nice and tightly to secure it into place. So you can see we've kind of been left with this strange kind of excess wool, kind of like a tail. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to work it back along the body, all the way back up to that starting point. And once we've kind of run out of wool, we're going to get our felting tool again. This is a triple needle I'm using, if you're wondering. And we're just going to felt along to secure that little piece of wool as well as the entire spine. So just work your way along, being careful to avoid the wire if you can, and that way you make sure you don't break your needle. So what we're going to do next is work our way along all of our legs. So again, we're just wrapping all the way round and down. You can see it's starting to hold itself at the top. And now we're coming to the paws. So this bit can be a little bit tricky, and it's definitely one of those things that comes with practice. So we're going to do a similar thing with the tail, the end of the spine. So we're going to keep wrapping until we've left kind of like a 5mm end tip pretty much. We're going to kind of bulk it out a little bit more, because if you think about a paw, it's quite raised up from the ground. So keep wrapping until you see you've got that little kind of chunky bulk right there. So what we're going to do next is we're going to actually take a little bit of that wire away. So we're going to trim it off a couple of millimeters. And the reason we do this is the less wire we have, the easier it is to felt in fine details. So again, going back in with our flat nose pliers to just wrap that little bit of wire around. So it's a little bit fiddly as you don't have as much wire as you did with the spine. So take your time, squeeze nice and tightly to secure it. And with the paws again, keep wrapping. So you're going to cover up that wire. We don't have to worry too much about it on the spine, but with the paws, make sure the wire is fully covered. And the more bulk you add here, the easier it will be when you come to actually do your coloured wool and your details. And take that wool right back up the leg again after you've added that bulk to the paws, and just go as far as it will let you, so all the way up to the top. And if you're struggling, if your piece is too long, you can always trim it, so don't worry too much. And once we've made it all the way back up to the top of the leg, we're going to take our felting tool to secure this into place. Now, it always looks messy at this stage, and it's kind of one of those things that you feel like you're trying forever to make it look neat and tidy. But remember, this is going underneath the rest of the wool, so don't worry too much. And if it does look a little frazzly, like there's lots of loose ends, that's actually fine because it works as a great grip for other layers of wool. So don't worry about it, keep going. It's imperfectly perfect. So of course we're going to repeat that process for all of the legs. So get those done and we'll have a good starting point. And here's one I made earlier, all 4 legs completed, and we've left that little neck nice and free, no wool on that at all. So you can see what I mean by it's definitely rough, the first layer of wool. Some legs are thicker than others, and it's not a problem. So don't stress about that. So now we have most of our wire work covered, we can start adding more bulk to our armature. So this is a piece of about 20 to 30 centimetres, bit of carded wool again, so the same thing we used before. And I've sort of folded it on itself, kind of concertinaed, I guess. And we're going to just very gently felt to secure. So the first bulk bit of wool is always a little bit fiddly. So be careful because like I said before, we are at risk of breaking our needles because we're working very closely to that wire. So take your time and be careful because sometimes when you do break a needle, sometimes they can just sort of ping off. So do be careful when you're doing this. And remember, it's always really helpful to keep turning your sculpture over. Otherwise you'll have one flat side and one kind of rounded side, which you don't want. So keep felting and make sure your felting is even on all sides. So as I mentioned in part 1 of this tutorial, it's really important to make sure that your sculpture can still stand up because now's the time to make any alterations if it can't. As you progress, you're going to be adding more wool, so it's going to be harder to shape it how you want it to be. So even though that looked like quite a lot of wool, you can see here it's actually still really squishy and soft. So we're going to need to add a lot more wool and a lot more felting to this to make sure that it's nice and sturdy for our sculpture. So we've got our kind of sides and belly kind of bulk layer in place. So now we're going to work on the chest. So again, we're using about a 20 centimetre strip folded in half of the carded wool, and we're going to very carefully add that onto what we've got already. So it's a little bit easier now because you do have that kind of tummy wool in place. So just keep going and it will start to kind of blend together. It does look a bit strange again at this point when you're adding these base layers in, but it will all start to come together shortly. So just keep going. It's a really long process, but once you've done it, it'll be really rewarding because your sculpture's going to look great. So keep going, keep felting. It looks like it's never going to go anywhere, but it does. So just keep it going. We'll get there. So you can see here how it's kind of starting to take shape now, and we've got that little shape of the belly, and it's definitely a lot firmer. So what we're going to do next is we're going to keep adding more bulk, and we're going to have a little look at these back legs. So you can see where we made that spine, and it's kind of just sticking out. It's not its tail, this is like its back end. So what we're going to do, we'll take about a 15cm piece of our carded wool, we're going to roll it up so it's kind of like a cylinder. And we're going to leave like a little bit of a tail loose, just like that. So where you've added that bulk belly piece that we did first, and between that kind of little excess bit of the spine, you'll find that little cylinder kind of slots into place quite nicely. So kind of find where it fits and where it looks okay, and start kind of felting it into place. Now, it does feel like it's fighting you. It always feels like it wants to pop off because obviously you've got that kind of rolled up bit of wool ready to burst, but just persevere. So remember what I said about working on both sides, so also flip it around and work on the inside as well to make sure it's attached securely. So in a similar way to the wire, you can actually fold bits of the wool back in on itself. So if you feel like you've got a kind of sticky out bit that's not really going anywhere, just fold it in and this will help you with your bulk. So once you've got that sort of base felted on securely, we need to do the other leg. So let's do that. So we're going to do the exact same process on the other side. So you're going to roll up that bit of wool, leaving a tail, and you're going to pop that into that kind of little space that's there behind the armature. So the second leg is actually a little bit easier because there's more wool around the area to secure this little piece onto. But what's important to note is try not to go all the way through to the other side, so you're going onto the other leg, because obviously dogs have two separate legs on the back, and if you're felting them together, it's going to lack that realism. They're just going to be kind of like seized together. So you can see I've got that little issue here on that side, so we're going to, looks kind of painful, doesn't it? We're going to work around the rear end to make sure that the legs are separate. Important to remember, as weird as it is. Oof, sorry, little doggy, it'll be worth it. Please forgive me. So when we rolled up that wool and left the tail end, the purpose of that is to help you kind of blend that leg in seamlessly to the back, which you can see me doing here. It just helps kind of make it look a bit more natural and not as bulky or as square. So just keep working that kind of tail end in and you can see it blends out pretty well. So, like I say, it's important to check all sides of your sculpture. You can see here that the chest is actually really narrow, which on some animals it is, but on this particular Jack Russell that this armature will eventually become, she's actually quite chunky and quite stocky, so I'm going to add some more muscle structure onto those front shoulders. So when you start getting to the more kind of anatomical sculpting of muscles and things like that, The pieces of wool I use are a little bit smaller. That way it's much easier to kind of add more than to take away. So only get little bits of small wool to begin with as you're going. And you can see how we've gone from a very kind of shallow kind of chest that kind of looked like a V shape to a more rounded one. It looks more natural. So whatever it is you're sculpting, it's always worth having a look at photos from all angles and seeing how it all works, because it's all well and good having photos like just from the side, but you don't really know what they look like from the front. And there's a lot of muscle tone going on in the front, especially with things like dogs and horses. So definitely do your research and have a good look. And you can see now we're starting to bulk it out and it's starting to look a little bit more natural. So again, looking at our sculpture from a different angle, we have a very kind of skinny body. And this particular dog isn't super athletic, to put it politely. She's a little chubby and a little chunky, but that is absolutely fine. So we're going to add another layer. This time we're kind of wrapping it around. So this is about, again, 15 centimeters or so, just to start adding that bulk. Remember, don't add too much at this point. Little and often is a good way, because like I say, you can add more, but you can't take it away. So you can see with all our little added pieces, we have much more of a natural shape to our dog. So even though we've got a great base for our body now, our legs are looking a bit weird still, and they will do for a little while. So again, we can take very small strips of wool. For instance, when I work on these legs in particular, it was about 5 centimeter, very thin, wispy piece of wool. And I can start bulking out the top of the leg and blending it a little bit more. I do find with my sculptures that my armatures for the legs in particular aren't very detailed, and I really work and add the details when I'm doing the top coat. So it doesn't look great, I'll be honest with you, in this video, but in my following video next week, I'll show you how to refine the legs and the paws more. So bear with me. So I would say without doubt the back legs are always going to be trickier than your front legs. They have a lot more shape going on. So just take your time. And like I say, don't worry too much, because legs are always quite skinny on dogs, particularly with things like Jack Russells. So you don't want to add too much. We can do this a little bit later on, but as long as you've got a really good base, you'll be fine. So remember, your armature is a base for your sculpture. It's kind of going to be the carrier of your sculpture, if you will. So don't stress about the little frazzly bits on the end of paws or a slightly misshapen leg, because you're going to be working into this wool anyway. So I mean, you can see we're a little bit uneven with this, but it's fine because we're going to be working into it. And in the next video, I'm going to be showing you how we're going to refine these legs and paws. Now, it won't be this exact sculpture, as I did have to get this finished as it was a commission, but it will be something incredibly similar. Another Jack Russell. So join me on the next video and we'll look at how we make those paws. Thank you so much for watching, guys.